Shiashi turned around. Ran, Conan, what a coincidence to run into you. She glanced at Kogoro Mori standing with them. Mr. Mori, long time no see. We ran into that accident on the Shinkansen the other day and didn't get much chance to talk. I've also heard you've solved a lot of cases recently. As a detective myself, I'd like to learn from you. Shiashi thought of this warrior figure, someone from the anime who'd been hit by tranquilizer darts hundreds of times without a scratch, and found him rather imposing in a suit when he actually tried to be serious. That impression evaporated the moment Kogoro opened his mouth. Ha! I never thought I'd be so famous that even a beautiful lady knows of me. Kogoro guffawed, then suddenly pretended to be modest. Cough. My achievements are nothing to brag about. I only got lucky a few times. He couldn't help laughing again. Ha! Conan stared, exasperated. All those cases had been solved because of him. There was no way the old man could have managed alone. When Kogoro finally stopped, Shiashi and Ran used the lull to introduce one another. This is Lisa, Shiashi said. A friend I met a few days ago at the library. Ran mentioned there was someone in armor wandering around the museum, and I was curious. Lisa also likes art, so I invited her to come. Lisa smiled and shot a quick look at Shiashi, saying nothing. Kogoro's eyes immediately brightened when he saw Lisa. He hadn't expected to meet such a striking, poised woman today. His outing suddenly felt worthwhile. He smoothed his jacket, stepped closer, cleared his throat, and tried his most gallant tone. Cough, Miss Lisa, how do you do? Meeting you in such an artistic place feels like fate. I never imagined a refined woman like you would be interested in medieval art. Which piece have you liked the most? Ran watched her father's blatant flirting and clenched her fists, glaring at his back with murderous intent. Conan looked at Kogoro with equal disdain. The way the man went rigid at the sight of a pretty woman made Conan cringe. He noticed Ran's fists and sweat dropped inwardly for Kogoro. Lisa didn't react to the flirtation beyond a polite smile. I wouldn't say I like it all, she replied. Medieval artists were heavily influenced by religious doctrine and tradition, so they aimed for solemnity, mystery, and piety. Their work carries a strong religious tone, and that's what interests me. Oh, you like religious works? Kogoro perked up. Coincidentally, have done some research on that. He tried to sidle closer, ready to discuss art at arm's length. Before he could finish, Ran lost patience. She jabbed him in the waist. He doubled over and swallowed whatever line he was about to deliver. Ran slipped between him and Lisa, planting herself firmly to make sure her father couldn't follow through. Lisa laughed at Ran's bold move. Ran blushed. Miss Lisa, I'm sorry. My father was being rude. No, it's fine, Lisa said, waving a hand. Mr. Mori is amusing. Little sister Ran, you're adorable too. She smiled and reached out to pat Ran's head. It was the first time Ran had been praised by a mature woman other than her mother, and the compliment made her cheeks pink. Conan couldn't help glancing. Ran looked really sweet when she blushed. Since running into acquaintances was rare, they decided to tour the museum together. They moved through the exhibition halls, the Room of Earth, the Room of Heaven, the Room of Sea, stopping to look at various pieces. On the way, Ran gave Shiashi and Lisa a little background on the museum. It's being converted into a restaurant, Lisa sighed. What a pity for these beautiful works. I know, Ran agreed. We should make the most of it today. Soon there won't be any chance. She glanced back at Kogoro and Conan, who were trailing behind. Dad, Conan, don't you think so? Kogoro and Conan were lagging so far behind they barely heard. They flopped down onto nearby seats the moment the women paused. Lad, I'm exhausted, Ran. Let's go back, Conan whined. Same here. I'm hungry. We've walked enough, Kogoro chimed in. Ran frowned. Really? You're tired after just a few laps? Why aren't Shiashi and Miss Lisa tired? Seeing the two women still energetic, Kogoro and Conan had no comeback. Were women always more energetic on outings? Then Shiashi noticed an exhibit they'd missed. There's another gallery ahead we haven't seen. Ran brightened. Oh, the no entry sign is gone. We can go in now. She turned and fixed Kogoro and Conan with a look that left them no choice but to get up. They hadn't reached the gallery entrance when Shiashi suddenly stopped and blocked Ran and Conan. Hold on. I smell a strong scent of blood. Something's wrong inside. Before she could finish, Conan darted past her. Even with Shiashi's senses, she couldn't react fast enough. True to his reputation as the Grim Reaper Kid, the moment he thinks something's wrong, he charges. Conan bolted into the gallery. Ran and Kogoro followed in alarm, and Shiasi and Lisa exchanged a helpless look before hurrying after them. Ah! It hurts! Conan cried out as they entered, and a moment later they heard Kogoro lecturing him. 22. Mysterious Lisa. The exhibition hall was called the Gallery of Hell. True to its name, the lighting inside was sullen and dim. The surrounding exhibits were little more than shadowy outlines. But Shiashi and Lisa's excellent night vision immediately picked out the victim, a man impaled on a sword and hung on the wall like some grotesque trophy. Ran Mori hadn't noticed the corpse yet. Instinctively, Shiashi stepped in front of her to block the view. Shiashi, what's wrong? Ran asked. Ran, don't look. There's a body up ahead. Conan's first reaction was to bolt forward and investigate. Before he could move, a hand reached over and covered his eyes from behind. He froze. Who had come up behind him? There had been no footsteps. Could the killer still be nearby? He tried to pull away, but his movements were gently restrained. Lisa's voice, playful and soft, murmured in his ear, "Little brother, don't move. This isn't something you should see. Don't be too curious. Curiosity leads to trouble." When he realized it was Lisa, Conan relaxed. Of course she had covered his eyes. She believed a child shouldn't witness such a bloody scene. But he wasn't an ordinary child. He was Shinichi Kudo, the high school detective, stuck in a child's body because of those damn men in black. Now that a crime scene was right in front of him, he had to watch helplessly while a grown woman kept him from getting close. "Sis Lisa, I understand. I won't peep. Please let me go," he said. "Conan, something's happened. Don't go causing trouble." Rand's voice joined Lisa's, and she took Conan's hand, holding him back as well. Conan could only give a helpless, "Okay," and for now, surrendered. He would wait until their attention drifted before slipping away to examine things. Kogoro Mori had already called the police. The officers arrived quickly. Inspector Magure was on the scene. Seeing the familiar faces, Magure nodded with half-closed eyes. "It's you again, Mori." Kogoro beamed and gave a quick run-through of the situation and the victim's identity. The dead man was Boss Machinaka, the buyer who had recently purchased the museum and planned to convert it into a restaurant. The staff were gathered and visibly shaken by the discovery. Shiashi watched the museum director, Ochiai, with interest. He did not appear hysterical. Aside from an initial shock at seeing Machinaka's body, he remained unnervingly calm. "Officer," Ochiai said, "every exhibition hall has surveillance. If you check the monitors, you might find who did this." Magure looked pleased. Cameras meant a better chance at catching the killer on film. They went to the monitoring room and began to play back the footage from the hall. Conan seized the moment while Lisa was watching the recording to slip away from her grip and push forward through the crowd to the monitors. Lisa noticed him move, but paid it no mind. This little detective was obsessed with puzzles. She couldn't be babysitting him forever. He rushed to the screen, eyes hungry for clues. The footage showed the moments before the murder. Boss Machinaka stood checking his watch, apparently waiting for someone. He didn't notice the suit of armor behind him shifting. A blade slashed his back, then the armor moved swiftly to slash across his chest. It lifted the man with one hand, drove a sword through him with the other, and hung him on the wall. As the suited figure turned to walk out of frame, Magure paused the video. "This scene looks a bit like that painting at the crime scene. Divine punishment," he said. "It does!" Kogoro and Conan both felt the composition of the frame was strangely familiar. They had only glanced past the other works when they entered the hall, so the resemblance had registered only vaguely at first. Hearing the name of the painting made the connection click. The killer had staged the corpse to imitate that painting. Conan suspected the same, but he noticed something else. Lisa had immediately linked the filmed sequence to the painting and even said its name, something you wouldn't know without having seen it or knowing museum pieces well. Had she realized the connection as soon as she saw the scene earlier? Conan watched Lisa as she leaned toward Shiashi and whispered something. Shiashi's eyes widened, and she glanced back at Lisa in surprise. What had Lisa said? Shiashi then spoke up, voice steady. "Inspector Magure, I already know who the killer is. I know the modus operandi and the evidence. I know it all." Megure and Kogoro had already been narrowing suspects based on the no entry sign they'd encountered earlier. The killer had to be someone who knew the museum's interior well. Conan, primed to examine the footage, froze at Shiashi's announcement. They'd only watched the recording once. How could she possibly have everything figured out? Conan couldn't help but wonder if Shiashi had deduced it on her own or if Lisa had fed her the answer. Who exactly was Lisa? Merely a librarian, or someone with a prodigious memory and an insight sharp enough to unravel a crime at a glance? Chapter 23. The Dragon Slayer becomes the Dragon Inspector. Megure blinked at Shiashi's words and hurriedly asked, "Really? You already know who the culprit is? Who is it? And what was the modus operandi?" Shiashi didn't drag it out. "The culprit is Director Ochiai." Kogoro Mori and Inspector Megure stared at the director in surprise. Ochiai himself looked taken aback for a moment but didn't panic. "Miss Natsume," he asked, "you say I'm the culprit. Do you have any evidence?" Shiashi explained calmly. "First, the paintings on the wall where the victim was found, paintings that could have been splattered with blood, were moved in advance. That tells me the culprit cares about those works and didn't want them damaged. Second, on the recording there's a moment when Boss Mashinaka reacts with surprise after getting a note slipped behind him. He tries to write on it, then tosses the pen away and crumples the note. I found that pen at the scene, but its tip was retracted. A victim in a life-or-death situation wouldn't bother to retract a pen tip after writing. That means the pen was swapped." At that moment, a police officer handed over a scrap of paper found in the video, the name Kubota scrawled on it. Shiashi continued without waiting for questions. "The culprit must have written that. Since the pen was swapped and the pen actually at the scene writes normally, the original pen couldn't write. Inspector Megure, check if there are impressions on the paper where Kubota is written, marks left by a pen that had no ink. That would be what the victim was trying to write when he realized the pen didn't work." She went on. "The victim realized the pen wouldn't write and threw it away in anger. A pen like that would only be carried by museum staff. In other words, the person who had the non-writing pen is the one who swapped it, the culprit." Conan felt the pieces click into place. If the goal was to frame Kubota, the only person who could make sure Kubota had no alibi was the director himself. Shiashi stepped up to Director Ochiai and held out her right hand. "Then, Director, may I see if your pen writes?" With trembling fingers, he produced an identical pen. He didn't try to resist. "Miss Natsume is right," he said. "I did it. I killed that selfish devil, Boss Machinaka." He turned his head to Kubota. "And I framed Kubota to punish him for secretly selling the artworks I see as my children." Lisa sighed and moved closer to the painting, Divine Retribution. "It really is like this scene," she murmured. "The knight slays the devil, but is corrupted by it. The dragon slayer becomes the dragon." Director Ochiai gave a bitter, free smile. "Even with all my planning, I couldn't escape those eyes full of wisdom." He looked at Lisa. "Miss Lisa, you sounded a bit nostalgic when you said that. Were you thinking of someone? Just curiosity. If you don't want to say, that's fine." Lisa hadn't expected the question, but she didn't need to hide it. "I was thinking of a friend. He was corrupted after killing a demon dragon and was misled by people with bad intentions into doing terrible things. Fortunately, his friends never gave up on him, and he didn't become a demon dragon in the end." Ochiai's expression softened a touch. "Lucky for him. I suppose my destination is prison." He shrugged. "But I don't regret it. If I had to do it again—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I'm afraid I'd still choose to kill that devil." The case closed there. Inspector Megure escorted Director Ochiai away and reminded everyone to come down to the station to give statements when they had time. When that was settled, Shiashi noticed Kogoro and Conan looking famished. It was getting late to go home and cook, so she invited them to eat at the restaurant on the building's first floor, hers conveniently on the way out. Ran wanted to decline, not wanting to trouble anyone, but neither her father nor Conan would hear of it. With Shiashi's insistence, she agreed. As they walked, they chatted about what had happened at the museum. Kogoro looked at Lisa with curiosity. "Miss Lisa, that thing you said to Director Ochiai about your friend slaying a demon dragon, that was an exaggeration, right?" Rand's eyes were bright with wonder. "Do dragons really exist in this world?" Conan slipped his hands into his pockets and thought, half serious, half amused. Dragons aren't real, kids. But watching Rand so earnest was almost endearing. Before he could say anything, Lisa smiled and teased. It's true. Rand's face lit up. Eh? Dragons really exist? Conan stumbled. Was she serious? She was joking, right? Lisa burst out laughing. Pfft, I'm just kidding. The friend I met got hurt protecting people and was later deceived by malicious individuals into doing bad things. But someone never gave up on him, and he pulled through. It's a happy ending. Rand breathed out, touched and relieved. It was wonderful that someone wouldn't give up. Thankfully, nothing irreversible happened today. Kogoro rapped Conan on the head. See? I told you dragons don't exist. Stop getting worked up over nothing. Hey, uncle, don't exclude me, he thought, indignant. You looked surprised, too. Kids get no rights, apparently. Shi leaned closer to Lisa and whispered, Lisa, was the friend you mentioned Dvalin? Oh my, little cutie guessed it, Lisa replied, grinning. You said he killed a demon dragon. That could only be him. How could I not figure it out? Conan slowed his pace and drifted closer, moving quietly so he could eavesdrop without being noticed. From their low voices, he caught only fragments. Dvalin, kill, dragon, Venti. Dvalin, Venti, names and hints he didn't yet understand. Questions piled up. Was Dvalin really who Lisa meant? Was killing a dragon literal or a metaphor? Who was Venti, and how did Shi know any of this after such a brief meeting? He filed the mysteries away. One day he would uncover the secrets behind these people. For now, the case was closed, the culprit in custody, and a small kindness, friends who refused to give up, had saved someone from becoming what they feared. By the time they reached the restaurant, it was so late, the place was almost empty. They ordered a few dishes, the food arrived quickly, and Shi helped carry some plates from the kitchen. Seeing there wasn't much left to do, she asked Xiangling to sit and eat with them. Wow, these dishes are amazing! Ranmori couldn't help praising after her first bite. Kogoro Mori said nothing. He was too busy devouring his food. Conan breathed a sigh of relief that the menu hadn't included any of the house specialties. They tasted fine, but their appearance was downright bizarre. Xiangling beamed at the compliment. Thank you. Come back often, and when you have time, I'll make you our real specialties. Since you're friends with the Trav, with Shi, I can give you a discount. Rand nodded eagerly. With food this good, we'll definitely be back. Conan noticed that when Xiangling called Shi, she sometimes almost used a different name, correcting herself so quickly only someone listening closely would catch it, as if Shi had another name of. Xiangling was more used to. He also had a hunch that Xiangling and Lisa were connected somehow. Ah! I left soup simmering on the stove. I'll get it. Xiangling jumped up. The ornament at her waist tapped the table with a crisp clack. Conan's gaze snapped to it, and something clicked. He whipped his head toward the necklace at Lisa's throat. Both women wore similar pieces. There had to be a link. He'd met Xiangling and Lisa a few days apart. The beads' colors and settings had seemed different enough that he hadn't connected them before. Seeing them together now, he realized they were part of the same set, slightly translucent beads, each with a faint symbol inside. He wanted a better look at the one in Lisa's pendant. He didn't notice Rand's expression darken as she watched him stare. Finally, she smacked him over the head. Conan, where exactly are you looking? Have you been spending too much time with a certain lecherous old man and picked up his bad habits? She asked with a terrifying smile. Kogoro bristled. Why drag me into this? The kid's always been precocious. Maybe he was born a little pervert. He set down his chopsticks, stomach finally full, and asked Xiangling, who was bringing the soup, Boss, got any alcohol? Rand forgot about lecturing Conan and turned to stop her father. Dad, it's late. Drinking now will give you a headache tomorrow. Before Kogoro could argue, Xiangling said they didn't serve alcohol, and he slumped in defeat. With that temptation gone, Rand turned back to resume Conan's education. Seeing her look, Conan hurriedly explained. Rand Nichan, I was looking at Lisa Nichan's necklace. The bead looked unusual, so I kept staring. Not at, He scratched his head and widened his innocent eyes. Really? Rand already believed him. After all, what would a kid know? It was her father's usual inappropriate behavior that had put the wrong idea in her head. Aha! Conan nodded vigorously. Rand's expression softened. She patted his head. Sorry, Conan, I misjudged you. But don't stare at girls like that, okay? I don't want you to turn out like Dad. She glanced apologetically at Lisa. It's fine. Kids love pretty beads. Lisa lifted her necklace with one hand and studied it. Ran looked closely at the purple bead, rich, mysterious, almost regal. The symbol inside was hard to make out, but it reminded her of a flash of violet lightning in a summer storm. Lisa glanced at Ran, then unclasped the necklace and held it out. Interested? Want a closer look? Ran accepted it carefully. Is this okay? It must be valuable. Conan was surprised. Lisa had taken it off so casually. He had expected her to guard the pendant, but she handed it over without hesitation. Did that mean it wasn't important? No, he trusted his instincts. The necklace had secrets. He leaned in toward Ran's hand. Inside the bead, he could make out a 3-comma-shaped symbol, almost like a jagged lightning bolt. The setting around the bead looked like wings. He remembered Xiangling's bead having a square frame. Did the different settings mean anything? And what did the symbols stand for? Lisa took a sip of her drink and chuckled. It's only a glass bead. I wear it because it has special meaning to me, not because it's worth anything. Ran and Conan exclaimed in unison. A glass bead? 25. Tevat Organization. Ran Muri stared at the necklace in surprise. Was something this beautiful made of glass? No, when Conan had touched it, it hadn't felt like ordinary glass. For a moment, he couldn't tell what material it was. How odd, Conan blurted. Sister Xiangling has something like that at her waist, too. Did she and Sister Lisa buy them at the same place? Everyone turned to look at the little ornament hanging from Xiangling's belt as she returned with the soup and sat down. Ran peered closer. They do look similar. The shape and color are a bit different, but they're definitely alike. Kogoro waved it off. Common glass beads like that are sold everywhere. They probably just happened to pick similar ones. Xiangling, seeing their curiosity about the vision at her waist, untied it and handed it to Ran. It's probably a coincidence. These things are pretty common. I don't know Miss Lisa, but since she's Xiaxi's friend, she's my friend too. You're welcome to visit anytime. I'll make lots of delicious food. She grinned at Lisa. I'll look forward to Chef Xiangling's cooking, Lisa replied, smiling. Conan held Xiangling's bead and was dumbfounded. No way this was so easy. He'd expected it would be hard to get close enough to examine one. Xiangling's bead was square, set in a rotated square frame. The gem was a fiery red, and the symbol inside looked like an abstract flame. It seemed faintly warm to the touch. If colors corresponded to elements, red would be fire. Lisa's was purple, maybe lightning? And what did the different frames mean? Why did the two of them have different outer settings? Had Xiangling and Lisa actually never met before? Their unfamiliarity looked genuine. And what was Xiaxi's relationship with them? She didn't have one of those accessories herself. She just happened to know them? Too few clues. Conan sighed inwardly. He couldn't piece anything together yet. Seeing Conan's puzzled expression, Lisa smiled with interest, while Xiangling paid no more attention and urged Xiaxi and the Moorists to eat before the food got cold. After a while, Ran returned each bead to its owner. With their stomachs full, the Moori family said their goodbyes. Conan noticed Lisa wasn't getting ready to leave. My home's a bit far, so I'll stay the night and take the chance to chat with my new friends, Lisa said, patting Conan's head. Little brother, are you satisfied with the explanation? Haha, I was just asking. Ow! Conan rubbed his head as his uncle gave him a sudden smack. Kogoro scolded him, then turned to Lisa with his usual showman's grin. Miss Lisa, you're welcome to visit the agency any time. If you ever need help. Ran, wait, I haven't said goodbye, Kogoro began, but Ran grabbed his hand and dragged him away without letting him finish. Conan followed reluctantly, cursing inwardly. He'd wanted to know more. There was no way this was just a casual visit. He had been too embarrassed to install an eavesdropping device on his glasses in front of everyone, so he let the opportunity pass. There would be other chances. He could only hope this had nothing to do with those men in black who'd made him small. After the outsiders left, Xiangling closed the door and turned to Xiaxi. All right, traveler, what are we going to discuss? Xiaxi sat down and gestured for Xiangling and Lisa to join her. She cleared her throat and adopted a serious expression. Xiangling scratched her head. What organ? Oh, the Tevat Organization. Xiangling, You didn't forget about the organization, did you? Lisa teased as she shot her a reproving look. Xiangling blushed. Sorry, there aren't many people in the organization right now, just us. And with Al-Haytham, well, we haven't done much. Over time, I just forgot. By the way, traveler, have you seen Al-Haytham recently? Xiangling asked. Xie sighed. I haven't seen him. I've sent him messages, but he hasn't said what he's up to. There shouldn't be any danger, though. She looked helpless. I can't control him, so I have to let him act freely. Don't worry. Al-Haytham uses discretion. I'll tell him what comes out of today's discussion. On the other side of things, acting with discretion meant Al-Haytham had been sneaking into Sherry's laboratory using stolen permissions, searching for data on replicating APTX 4869. The organization hadn't noticed his movements, so apparently there was no immediate danger. After joining the group, Al-Haytham had tried to avoid fieldwork and instead produced some useful research. A stamina-replenishing potion with no long-term side effects that could be used at critical moments. If taken when injured or in crisis, it would quickly restore stamina and temporarily enhance physical capability, allowing a breakthrough in potential. It was especially helpful for personnel doing dangerous tasks. The only drawback was a short period of limb weakness after use, so timing mattered. Because this research was useful to the organization and they generally didn't send a renowned scholar undercover, Al-Haytham quickly earned a code name, Bordeaux, becoming the fastest person in the organization to receive one. Today was only the second day after he'd gotten that code name. The APTX 4869 potion was the fuse of the whole plan. Everything had started from it, so mastering the related data was crucial for future contact with both the organization and any opposing groups. Al-Haytham never intended to fight battles he wasn't prepared for. Before engaging, he wanted as much data and as many trump cards as possible. Setting Al-Haytham aside for the moment, Xie quickly sketched out their next moves. First, Lisa, you should stay at the Baika library for now. Keep an eye on the director and try to find the source of his drugs. I remember there's a case on Tsukikage Island later that also involves drugs. The director could have ties to Tsukikage, or his supply might even come from there. Her mission was supposed to be to keep the red and black sides balanced. From the plot of the anime she remembered, the red side might end up stronger, meaning she'd probably have to help the black side later. Still, Xie had no desire to be complicit in anything monstrous, especially not anything involving drugs. She hated them. If she ran into them, she wanted to eradicate them as much as possible. She also didn't want to be tied to one side. If the black side grew too strong, she'd be forced to help the red side in turn. What she needed was a neutral organization that belonged to neither faction. Lisa nodded, understanding. Makes sense, she said gently. What about me? Traveler, what do you want me to do? Xiangling raised a hand. And me, she added, eyes bright with curiosity. Xie met Xiangling's expectant gaze and smiled. Xiangling, your main task for now is to run the restaurant well. When business picks up, there will be more foot traffic, and more people means more information. Listen to what customers say. You'll pick up useful intel. She worried Xiangling might struggle handling the kitchen alone. She considered hiring help, but didn't like the idea of strangers living in the same house. For now, she left the problem unresolved, hoping she could pull a suitable character later to assist. If no one turned up, she'd have to hire from outside. I understand, Xiangling said cheerfully. As for me, Xie continued, I'll get closer to the main cast, take on as many missions as I can, save up more primogems, and pull more characters. It's embarrassing to have an organization with members you can count on one hand. She sighed. We'll adjust plans once we recruit more people. Right now, we don't lack money, but we definitely lack members. Little Cutie is working so hard, Lisa teased. I knew your organizational skills were top-notch. Keep it up. Xiangling nodded enthusiastically. The traveler's really impressive. Xie felt awkward under their praise. She literally wanted to curl up into the floor. Part of the awkwardness came from the fact that they were, in a way, reflections of herself. It was like listening to herself praise herself, which felt a little narcissistic. Paimon popped up at that moment, striking an imperious pose. Ahem, yes, traveler. You're doing pretty well. but you're still a bit behind Paimon in some areas. You should consult Paimon more. I'll give you proper guidance. Xiaxi couldn't help the half-moon smile tugging at her lips. Thanks a lot, Paimon, she said, emphasizing the thanks. Paimon beamed, completely oblivious to the tone. No need to be so formal. I'm your best companion after all. I'll definitely help you, haha. By the way, little cutie, Lisa said, interrupting the light banter, have you tried using elemental power recently? Can you use it now? At the question, Xiaxi slumped onto the table and looked dejected. I tried, she said. You remember, I tried the moment I arrived. I couldn't use it then. Her frustration simmered. It's not fair. Why can you all use it and I can't? Is the traveler being discriminated against? Ever since she learned the Genshin role-playing system had been pulled into this world, Xiaxi had secretly looked forward to using elemental powers. After one failed attempt, she had convinced herself it was because Conan's world was realistic and had no magic. But then she found that every character she'd pulled could use elemental power, everyone except her. It nagged at her. Lisa laughed softly at her expression, then quickly tried to hide it. Sorry, your reaction was just really cute, like a kid's. Ah, Lisa, Xiaxi protested, equal parts embarrassed and annoyed. Okay, back to business. You haven't tried again since pulling the characters, have you? Try now. Maybe it'll work, Lisa encouraged. Xiaxi realized she had only ever tried that one time and felt a little hopeful. Maybe this time would be different. She moved to an open space by the table and tried once more to attune herself to the elements. At first, she felt only faint, indistinct currents brushing against her awareness. Then slowly, the presence of elements coalesced, thin and gossamer at first, but undeniably there. She reached out with her right hand and tried to make contact. A gentle breeze swirled into her palm. An emo. It was real. She could use an emo. She concentrated and probed for others. Geo came next, solid and grounding beneath her feet. Then a warm, verdant hum bloomed. Dendro. She couldn't touch every element, but she could call Anemo, Geo, and Dendro. The sensation was strange and natural at once. Once she resonated with an element, she instinctively understood how to use it. With a single thought, she could call upon the corresponding force. See? You can use elemental power after all, Lisa said, pleased. Right now you've pulled me, Xiangling, and Alhaitham, who represent Mondstadt, Liu, and Sumeru. And you just happen to resonate with the elements associated with those nations. If you pull characters from Inazuma or Fontaine, you might be able to attune to more elements. Xiaxi considered the idea and nodded. It made sense. Lisa stepped forward and ruffled Xiaxi's hair. That makes me feel better. This world has a lot of dangerous people, some of them murderers, and some even use guns. Martial arts alone won't always be enough to keep you safe. Lisa's words, delivered with unexpected seriousness, left Xiaxi momentarily speechless. Then she straightened, determination flaring in her eyes. Lisa, Xiangling, and in her mind she added, and Paimon. Don't worry, I will protect myself. I am the traveler after all. 27. Department stores. 2 weeks later, at the department store. Not this one either. Ah, found it. There really is dandelion wine. Xiaxi rummaged through the wine shelves, checking bottle after bottle until she finally found what she'd been looking for. It was definitely dandelion wine. Lately, Conan had been visiting Xiaxi frequently, usually with the detective boys in tow, so she'd become acquainted with the Muri family. The more she interacted with them, the more often she ran into cases. There were few peaceful days when she stayed near the Shinigami Elementary School student. In just 1 week, the primogems from her daily commissions had piled up enough for another 10 pull. Before spinning the gacha, Xiaxi had even washed her hands thoroughly, superstition or habit, to try and pull someone good for business. If she got a character with commercial skills, the maple leaf gold coins she had intercepted from Conan would finally have a purpose instead of just sitting in her inventory. Having that cash flow would also make it easier to set up a discreet base. Her own home wasn't ideal, since Conan and the others visited so often and might stumble over any clues. Whether it was the hand-washing or just luck, the pull gave her 2 characters that fit her needs perfectly. One was Master Diluc, the wealthy owner of Dawn Winery and a Viscount of Country H. In this world, he was a nobleman who owned a winery. At first, Xiaxi had been envious, a noble with his own business. Later, she learned that although Diluk owned Dawn Winery, it was mostly a name, an empty shell with no products on sale. Most people knew him as the Viscount of Country H who owned a winery, but not the details. If Diluk wanted the winery to actually produce and sell wine, someone had to do the work. That actually suited Xiaxi. The maple leaf gold coins in her inventory now had a use. She gave them all to Diluk so he could return to Country H, buy raw materials, and develop products. She didn't expect him to get a prototype out so fast. Timeline oddities aside, the product was already at prototype stage and just needed recipe tweaks. Xiaxi was pleasantly surprised to see Dawn Winery's dandelion wine hit the market and even be sold here in Baca. The other pull was Noelle, currently a maid under contract with a household. Her contract still had time left, and it was arranged that once it expired, she would go help at Xiangling's restaurant. That way the restaurant wouldn't have to hire an outsider. Perfect. Both characters were from Mondstadt. Xiaxi was a little disappointed she hadn't unlocked a new element, but she was happy to pull characters that were useful right now. She even asked Paimon in a whisper whether she'd opened a back door to tweak the rates. Paimon denied it, leaving it as pure luck. Xiaxi felt even better. After seeing the dandelion wine on the shelf, she bought a bottle. She'd always been curious how wine brewed from dandelions would taste. In the game, she couldn't drink it, but now it was a physical bottle she could finally sample. If it was good, she could have Diluk supply wine to Xiangling's restaurant and spare Mr. Mori from his perennial complaints about having nothing to drink. When Xiaxi finished shopping, she headed for the exit. On the first floor plaza, a common Yaiba event was in full swing. She immediately spotted Genta, standing out among the kids, and sure enough, Conan and the other detective boys were there. Conan was shouting, "Go, go, go Kamen Yaiba." He fit right in among the elementary schoolers. Lately, he'd been acting more and more like a real kid. Conan's presence meant a case was likely to break out in the mall. With a Kamen Yaiba event in play, Xiaxi remembered. Last time there had been a kidnapping and robbery at a department store where a gang dressed as Kamen Yaiba to steal valuables. One of the store's staff had been an inside man. She couldn't recall who it was or how many robbers there had been, but she knew a case tended to follow that combination. Since she'd run into them anyway, Xiaxi didn't intend to miss an opportunity to earn Primogems. She tucked the wine into her bag and planned to swing by home first to drop it off. Better safe than sorry in case a fight broke out. Besides, she remembered the robbers wouldn't make their move until after dark, so there was plenty of time to return. Without interrupting the detective boys, she bypassed the event area and left. Conan, watching the crowd, had noticed long ago that Xiaxi took commissions almost every day, even simple ones like finding a lost cat or delivering a letter. She never seemed to have a full studio, yet people kept finding her. He had no idea about systems or inventory. He only wondered how she always seemed to be on the job. By nightfall, Xiaxi was back at the department store. She looked up and saw SOS painted on a window a few floors up, the distress signal Conan and the others had left. She found a window on one floor, tapped it, and judged it to be very thick. Concentrating, she used georesonance on the pane. With a sharp crack, the whole window shattered. The trick worked. Xiaxi didn't hesitate. She climbed through the opening. She'd memorized the mall's layout during the day and knew the security room was on the second basement level. Whoever was running the robbery would be controlling the cameras from there. She made her way to the security room door and peered in. Only one robber sat at the monitors. The others must have gone after Conan and the rest. The remaining security staff and the elevator attendant she'd seen earlier were tied up, blindfolded, pressed against the wall. There weren't many people, so Xiaxi slipped in, crept up behind the lone guard, and knocked him out while he was off guard. After securing him, she moved to the tied-up employees and studied them carefully. She still remembered there was supposed to be an insider in this robbery. Which of these faces belonged to the mole? The mole was painfully obvious, and Xiaxi could see it without even thinking. A group of guards were tied together, while the elevator attendant was tied separately. That alone made her different from the others. Besides, although the guards' faces were hard to make out, they looked ordinary, whereas the elevator girl stood out. Authors don't usually spend effort describing irrelevant extras. That was a sign she wasn't simple. Um, are you here to rescue? Hmm. The elevator girl began, as if realizing something. She didn't wait for her to finish. She knocked her out decisively. Criminals talking were only trying to stall or deceive. She had no patience for it. She didn't untie the other guard's hands and feet either. Though she was nearly certain who the mole was, it was safer to wait for the police before freeing anyone. She used the guardroom phone to call in the situation at the department store, then turned her attention back to the surveillance feeds the robbers had been watching, looking for the remaining thieves and for Conan's group. A voice crackled from the walkie on the desk. "Hello? What happened over there? What was that noise just now?" She didn't answer. On the monitor, one robber in a Kamen Rider costume was anxiously holding a walkie and talking. He exchanged a few words with a companion, then the two split up and walked out of view. She scanned the other cameras. She saw no sign of Conan, Genta, Mitsuhiko, or Ayumi. They were deliberately avoiding the cameras so the robbers wouldn't spot them. Judging from the feed, the robbers had been on the third-floor clothing department. Since they split up, one must be heading back to the monitoring room to check the situation. That robber could go down by elevator or stairs, but the elevator had a camera and was too easy to ambush. Anyone entering it would be obvious, so he would take the stairs. Shiashi slipped to the stairwell and pressed herself against the wall, closing her eyes to listen. Faint, slow footsteps creaked up the stairs, muted, probably deliberately quiet. She listened until she was certain the footfalls didn't overlap. It was only one person. She didn't act until the robber reached the stairwell entrance. Then she sprang out and kicked him. The Kamen Rider costumed robber flew, slammed into the wall, and went out cold. Shiashi had added enough force to be sure he wouldn't get up. He might have even broken a few ribs from the impact, but that could wait. 3 were down so far. From the earlier surveillance, there should be 2 robbers left, currently facing off against Conan and the others. In the clothing department, Conan and the detective boys had been using mannequins to try and throw the robbers off, but Genta's growling stomach gave them away and wrecked the disguise, forcing them to run. Conan glanced back as they fled to count their pursuers. There had been 3, but now only 2 were chasing. Had the missing one tried to flank them? No. Ever since things got messy, the robbers hadn't coordinated well. Sometimes the kids had accidentally been caught on camera, but the robbers hadn't moved to capture them when that happened. Someone in the guard room must have been distracted. The missing robber had probably gone back to check. Had someone seen the distress signal on the window and returned? Conan decided they should handle the 2 chasers first and then go check the guard room. They ran toward the liquor section, planning to shake and spray bottles of alcohol at the robbers. Suddenly a thud sounded behind them, like a body hitting the floor. "Sister Shiashi!" Genta, Mitsuhiko, and Ayumi shouted together. Shiashi stood there, smiling calmly. She reassured the kids and then, without missing a beat, hurled the baseball she'd been tossing in her hand at the other conscious robber. The ball struck the robber's head with a sickening smack, and he collapsed instantly. Paimon couldn't help but praise her in her head. "Traveler, nice throw!" Conan glanced at the first robber who'd fallen and saw a baseball lying beside him too. He was dumbfounded. How much force did it take to knock someone out with a thrown baseball? The kids didn't care about the mystery. They rushed over to Shiashi, chattering excitedly about how they'd discovered the robbers and how they'd tried to handle them. With the immediate threat over, Shiashi led the children back to the guard room to wait for the police. "Sister Shiashi, these guards and the elevator girl are still tied up. I'll help you untie them," Ayumi said, eager to help. Shiashi stopped her immediately. "Don't untie her," she said. "This young woman is the robber's mole in the department store. She's their accomplice." A flash of understanding crossed Conan's mind. That explained everything. The elevator girl must have been working earlier as an attendant to do reconnaissance and guide the operation. She'd seen the detective boys during the day, and thus knew how many there were. She was out cold now, most likely because Shiashi had knocked her out. Conan pictured a few dark stress lines forming above his head. Xiaxi really did have a habit of knocking criminals unconscious. Not long after everything had been resolved, the police finally showed up, late as everyone had expected. Xiaxi explained the situation, then turned Genta, Mitsuhiko, and Ayumi over to them so the kids could be taken home. Konan Edogawa was heading the same way as Xiaxi, so she walked him back herself. Before leaving, she called Ron to explain what had happened, and, since Ron and the others hadn't cooked yet because they were worried about Konan, she invited them to Xiangling's restaurant for dinner. Ran hesitated at first, but the moment Kogoro Mori heard that the restaurant had just bought a new bottle of wine, he agreed without thinking. Good food and good wine were always a guarantee. Ran had little choice but to accept. At the restaurant, they all sat together, though Lisa was absent. "Mr. Mori, I know you like to drink. Why don't you try the new wine our restaurant just bought?" Xiangling said as she poured a glass for him. Kogoro didn't bother with formalities and downed it in one gulp. "Not bad, not bad. This wine's good. What is it?" "I'll buy a bottle to take home." Xiangling smiled. "It's dandelion wine. Shashi just bought it at the department store today." Conan, at the mention of department store, suddenly realized he hadn't been mistaken earlier. The figure he'd seen during the day had indeed been Xiaxi. Dandelion wine? Ran had never heard of making wine from dandelions either. Conan leaned closer to look at the bottle and saw it was from Dawn Winery. In his memory, that was a fairly well-known winery in Country H, owned by a noble family. If the bottle really was from there, why hadn't he heard of it before? Xiangling shrugged. "They say it's made from dandelion seeds with some special method. Maybe they add the flowers, too." She poured a glass for Xiaxi. The liquid was clear and pale, with a faint floral scent that suggested dandelion blossoms had been used. Xiaxi tasted it and found it pleasant, mild, not harsh, and with a light fruity note. It was the sort of delicate drink that might be called Venti's favorite, subtle but well-made. Xiaxi kept drinking, and with Xiangling's delicious food beside her, had a few more glasses than she should have. By the time Xiangling noticed, Xiaxi was tipsy. Her memory of the rest of the night was fuzzy. She vaguely recalled that after they had eaten and drank their fill, Ran and the others had invited her to a wedding the next day and said they wanted to introduce her to a friend, but the details were lost in the fog. She cursed herself inwardly for underestimating this body's alcohol tolerance. Getting drunk in front of Konan Edogawa was embarrassing, but with Xiangling nearby, she hoped she hadn't said anything too regrettable. When Xiaxi woke up, Xiangling handed her a glass of warm honey water and looked worried. "Traveler, do you have a headache? Drink this. I added honey, should help you feel better." Thirsty and still groggy, Xiaxi drank it all. She asked what had happened after she'd passed out. Xiangling summarized, then reminded her that Ron had invited them to attend a wedding the next day and wanted to introduce her best friend. Xiangling had declined for herself because she had to work at the restaurant, but she'd agreed on the traveler's behalf. "Go," Xiangling urged. "You've been working non-stop. Don't just live on commissions. I know you've been in contact with Diluk every night these past few days about the winery funding." "It can't be helped," Xiaxi admitted. "Starting a business is complicated. This will help establish the organization's footing, and I can't leave it all to Diluk. There's also a time difference with Country H, so I can only reach him at night. I didn't mean to hide it from you. Please forgive me, Xiangling." Xiangling put her hands on her hips but smiled. "I'm just saying you need to rest. A little time off, then you can try other good food and tell me all about it so I can learn new recipes." Xiaxi eyed her deadpan. "Xiangling, do you really think going out with Konan Edogawa will be relaxing?" Xiangling blinked and was momentarily at a loss for words. Finally, she stammered, "Well, nothing might happen. Conan hasn't had many cases lately, and were there ever any wedding-related cases in the early Conan stories?" She thought for a moment, then shrugged. Both of them couldn't recall specifics. Xiaxi knew she shouldn't rely too heavily on fragmented memories anyway. This was the real world, and her presence might change how things played out. If anything, being too certain of plot beats could be worse than being cautious. In the end, she kept her promise. If a case did arise, she'd pay close attention and handle it quickly. The next day, Xiaxi arrived at the Muri household on time. After knocking and going inside, she found Ran, Conan, and another girl she didn't recognize. Short bobbed brown hair, a blue headband, the same Tayton High School uniform as Ran, Suzuki Sonoko, Ran's best friend. Sonoko was bubbly and friendly. They warmed to each other almost instantly. When Sonoko learned Shiashi was older than both her and Ran, she refused to believe it. What? Shiashi, you're actually older than us? I can't tell at all. She leaned in, inspecting Shiashi's face closely. Your skin, honestly, you look younger than me. Ran laughed in agreement. Yeah, you honestly don't seem like someone who's already graduated and is working. Is there some secret to your good looks? Sonoko begged. Shashi just smiled calmly. No secret. Maybe it's just natural. That answer made Sonoko even more envious. I want that too. They chatted as they walked to the wedding venue, the girls trading gossip and laughing. Conan trailed behind them looking bored, the picture of a kid forced to tolerate girls' endless interest in age and appearance. The group arrived at the wedding site, a church. By the time they reached the entrance, the open square in front was already packed with people. Shiashi noticed that some of the guests, though in plain clothes, bore the subtle signs of training, plainclothes officers. Was one of the bridal couple connected to the police? Hey Shiashi, Sonoko and I are going to film the bride. Want to come? Ran asked, hoisting a camcorder. Sure, I'm curious to see this teacher you say sings so beautifully dressed as a bride. Maybe I'll even hear that amazing voice. And it's only polite to greet the bride at her wedding, Shiashi said. Exactly. The teacher's voice is gorgeous, the total opposite of some tone-deaf blowhard who can never stay on key and always makes her angry. Sonoko rolled her eyes at the absent egomaniac. Shinichi's singing isn't that bad. Ha! Ha! Ron laughed nervously. Calling me tone-deaf? How mean? Conan bristled. And Ran, why so guilty? Am I really that awful? Conan fumed inwardly. Fine, he'd see for himself who was brave enough to marry that fierce teacher. Wow, I never knew Kudo was tone-deaf, Shiasi exclaimed. Great, another vote for tone-deaf. Sonoko and her big mouth, Conan muttered. They chatted as they walked and soon reached the bride's dressing room. The moment the door opened, the sight of the bride in white left them stunned. She was breathtaking. This truly was the most radiant moment of a woman's life. The joy and anticipation on her face only heightened the glow. Shiashi felt a twinge of unease. She didn't want this happy bride to become today's victim. She resolved to keep a close eye on everything around them. When she refocused, Ran was introducing her. Miss Matsumoto, hello. Thanks for letting us crash your wedding. You look absolutely stunning today. Not at all. If you're friends of Sonoko and Ran, you're welcome. Matsumoto Sayuri waved it off. I just didn't expect the gorgeous Natsume to come instead of that cocky brat. I was going to flaunt my gown for him. So Kudo's absence disappoints you, Ran said. Sayuri was as prickly as ever. I'm still flaunting it, just not to his face. Over here, Ran lifted the camera. We're your photographers today. Sonoko, better start planning your kiss pose. Sayuri didn't blush. Leave it to me. Just then the door opened again, and another woman stepped inside. Sayuri, I got your lemon tea. Sayuri gathered her train and hurried over, taking the can with delight. Thanks, Kazumi. She popped the tab, but Takanaka Kazumi stopped her. You'll smudge your lipstick. She inserted a straw and handed the can back. Lemon tea? Shiasi asked herself. Bringing a specific drink on your wedding day meant either real fondness or a special meaning. And in Conan's world, the latter was far more likely. If it mattered, it could tie into whatever crime might unfold. Shiashi watched closely for clues. Huh? Sayuri blinked at the question, then blushed faintly. Yes, I love it. She caressed the can and winked. Actually, I developed a taste for it because of my first love. First love? Sonoko and Ran shrieked before Shiashi could react. Even Conan looked surprised. This fearsome teacher had a first love? Sayuri laughed at their shock and tapped her chin, reminiscing. He lived nearby. Whenever I was bullied, he'd dash out to protect me, and he'd sneak warm lemon tea from his house for me. That sweet, sour flavor. I drink it to remember him, to give myself courage. Sonoko's eyes sparkled. So what happened next? Sonoko. Ran tugged her arm. It was their teacher's wedding. Prying was rude. Sayuri didn't mind. She sighed. Then he moved away without warning. I never learned where, but you found someone new to trust. You'll be happy, Ran comforted. Sayuri smiled. True, but don't tell Toshihiko, the groom. He doesn't know. She glanced at Kazumi, who had listened with a gentle smile. Kazumi, sorry, about Toshihiko. Kazumi blinked, then laughed and slapped Sayuri's shoulder. Leaning in, she added solemnly, What are you talking about? Haven't you realized? I'm going to reveal at the ceremony that the groom, Toshihiko, is my ex-boyfriend. Matsumoto Sayuri stared at Takanaka Kazumi in mild surprise. Kazumi? Takanaka chuckled at Sayuri's expression and couldn't help waving as she laughed. Just kidding. All right, see you later. Sonoko blinked, puzzled. Who was that just now? Kazumi's a good friend from university, Sayuri said, watching Kazumi walk away. Shishi watched Sayuri's faintly melancholic silhouette and said, Miss Matsumoto, you don't need to dwell on it. I can tell Miss Kazumi has already moved on from Toshihiko. Eh? Sayuri blinked at how Natsume, no, Shiashi, had guessed. Shiashi smiled when she saw the confusion and explained. If she still cared about it, she wouldn't have said it so jokingly. You and Kazumi are close. Her friendship with you must mean more than Toshihiko did to her. Sayuri's gloom melted away. So that's how Kazumi sees it. She nodded. You're right. If Kazumi's let it go, I should too. She dug into the bag Kazumi had left and found another bottle of lemon tea. There's another bottle here. Anyone want it? Sonoko, curious about the lemon tea the teacher liked, reached for it. I'll try it. Shiashi studied the bottle in Sonoko's hand and suddenly asked, Miss Matsumoto, was the childhood first love who gave you lemon tea? Toshihiko, the man you're marrying today? Eh? Sonoko and Ran both gasped. Conan turned toward Shiashi. How did she connect Miss Matsumoto's childhood first love with today's groom? Had she noticed something Conan had missed? Sayuri, surprised, blurted, How did you know? Shiashi's expression was unruffled. It's simple. First, your face when you mentioned your first love just now. Your expression changed. Second, you're still drinking the lemon tea tied to that memory. That shows you haven't forgotten him. She held up one finger and then another. And the second point, I heard Miss Kazumi say the groom used to be her boyfriend. You and Kazumi are close. Without a special reason, you wouldn't date her ex. Kazumi didn't look bothered just now, so she must already know. Otherwise, no matter how close, she wouldn't act so unconcerned. Sayuri stared at Shiashi for a heartbeat, then wiped at her eyes with a fingertip. Honestly, Shiashi, you nailed it. She gave a small laugh and lowered her head. Yes, Toshihiko was my first love. After I met him again, he reminded me so much of those old feelings. Kazumi helped me find out. Kazumi told me, but Toshihiko doesn't know. Shiashi noticed the bittersweet look on Sayuri's face. Before she could ask more, Sayuri's tone brightened. Amazing. You uncovered that with just a few words. You're like a detective, maybe even better than that arrogant Kudo boy. Conan's ears burned. Hey, I'm not even here, and you still have to bring him up? He thought sourly. Still, he couldn't deny that Shiashi had seen a lot from so little. Her deductions came from reading expressions and psychology. When it came to pure deduction from physical clues, he was confident he wouldn't be worse, but she hadn't needed such clues this time. Sonoko clasped her hands to her chest, eyes shining. How romantic. Childhood love's losing touch, meeting again among strangers as adults, falling in love, and now getting married. Miss Matsumoto, you two are meant to be. You'll be so happy. Shiashi inwardly hoped today's wedding would proceed without a case, at least that the bride and groom wouldn't get caught up in trouble. Just then, the waiting room door opened. A tall, middle-aged man with a scar over his left eye and a severe expression came in and went straight to Sayuri. Sonoko and Ran, worried, stepped between him and Sayuri. Who are you? Why did you barge in? Ran demanded sharply, ready to push him away. Sayuri and Inspector Megure, who had followed shortly behind the man, quickly explained. He was Sayuri's father, Matsumoto Kiyochika, a superintendent in the 1st Investigation Division of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department and Megure's superior. Superintendent Matsumoto clearly disapproved of the groom Sayuri was about to marry. A few terse words passed between him and Megure before he relented and left the room. At 1:30, a senior of Ran's, Umemiya, arrived, paid his compliments to Miss Matsumoto, and departed as well. Looking at the current lineup, Shiashi thought the suspects were starting to stack up. Kazumi, the groom's ex, a senior who might harbor feelings, and someone else who might be connected. The bride really did seem vulnerable today. So far, Shiashi hadn't seen the groom, Toshihiko, himself. She had a bad feeling about Sayuri's sad expression when the groom had been mentioned earlier and hoped he wasn't the threat. Otherwise, Sayuri would be devastated. "Uh-oh, the camera battery's dead," Ran suddenly cried. She'd been filming and noticed the low battery icon. She set the camera on a nearby stool. "Miss Matsumoto, stay here. We're going to get batteries," she said, and she and Sonoko left, leaving Shiashi and Conan in the waiting room. Without warning, Sayuri reached up behind Conan and slipped off his glasses. Conan turned instinctively. "I knew it. You look so much like Shinichi Kudo," Sayuri said, studying him without his glasses. It's true. I thought he looked familiar at first, but now with the glasses off. Conan, are you related to Shinichi Kudo? Could it be? Shiashi examined Conan's slow-to-react face. A playful idea flickered into her eyes. "Oh no, Shiashi's still here, and she's seen my face. She's usually so sharp. Could she be suspecting something about my connection to Shinichi?" A cold sweat prickled down Conan's neck. Shiashi leaned in, speaking slowly and deliberately, word by word. Conan's eyes widened as she paused between each syllable. "A relative?" Oh boy, was Conan Edogawa really that bad at acting? He looked so obviously guilty. That wouldn't do. There would be plenty of suspicious situations in the future. If he couldn't keep a straight face, his true identity would be easily exposed. Shiashi told herself she was doing him a favor, training him to be better at hiding things. She almost smiled inwardly at how kind she was being to Conan. Conan's heart pounded faster as Shiashi's words reached him, especially when she guessed, "Conan Edogawa is Shinichi Kudo." He felt a surge of panic, but the last few words let him breathe again. It was unlikely she'd guessed the whole truth. Most people wouldn't imagine an adult trapped in a child's body. Still, since meeting Shiashi, he'd learned she was unusually sharp and quick to accept odd possibilities. It was possible she might have had an inspired guess. Fortunately, she didn't leap to that extreme. She'd concluded only that Conan and Shinichi were relatives. "Yes, Shinichi Nichan and I are distant relatives. That's why we look a bit alike. Ha ha!" Conan laughed, feeling apologetic. "A real irresponsible boy," Shiashi scolded, "leaving a relative's child to be looked after by a childhood friend without even showing your face. Miss Matsumoto, when you choose a partner, being childhood friends isn't enough. You must pick someone responsible." She used the chance to warn Matsumoto Sayuri, since she still found the groom suspicious. Conan clenched his small fists inwardly. "I didn't want any of this," he thought. "It's all the men in black's fault. One day I'll catch them, get that medicine, and turn back into Shinichi Kudo. Ran, wait for me." At that moment, a man in a white suit was pushed into the lounge from outside. He blushed, straightened up, scratched his head, and turned to the bride. "Sayuri, you're so beautiful." So this was the groom, Miss Matsumoto's first love. He seemed mild-mannered, but did he really care for her? Shiashi watched as he took the lemon tea from Sayuri's hand and lightly chided her for drinking something so unwholesome. Wait, what did he just do? Did he put something into the lemon tea? From this angle, Shiashi slowly turned her head to look at Sayuri. Surely she'd seen something too. Why hadn't she reacted? Conan noticed Shiashi's frown and the way she was staring at the groom. Strange, why was she looking at him so intently? Conan followed her gaze but could only see the lemon tea partially obscured by the groom's hand. Being a child had disadvantages. His line of sight was easily blocked. Shiashi's expression grew more certain as she watched Sayuri. Could it be that Sayuri knew the groom had drugged the drink and still intended to drink it? Why? Sometimes, Shiashi really couldn't understand the mindset of people in Conan Edogawa's world, whether culprit or victim. Conan watched her, baffled and increasingly anxious. What did she see that he didn't? He had been present too, so why did it feel as if Shiashi and he had noticed different things? "No, Shinichi Kudo, don't doubt yourself," he thought fiercely. "It must be because I'm in a child's body and missed some clues. I'll find out what Shiashi saw." Just then, Sonoko and Ran returned from buying batteries. Sonoko opened the door, spotted the groom, and exclaimed, "You're the heir to the Takasugi group." Apparently the groom knew Sonoko as well. He identified her as being from the Suzuki family. Sonoko muttered to Ran, indecisive, not reliable. She'd heard the Takasugi line might end with him, but Shiashi's sharp hearing picked up the whisper. She watched, conflicted, as Sayuri leaned forward to kiss the groom, which made Xiaxi even more convinced that the bride was about to drink the drugged tea. "The ceremony is about to begin," someone announced. Sayuri told the groom to go ahead. She'd be right there. The groom, Sonoko, and the others filed out of the lounge. Xiaxi followed and closed the lounge door behind them. Sonoko and the others wondered why, but before long the lounge door opened again. Conan and the others saw Xiaxi speak to Sayuri, who stood inside looking a little dazed. "Don't forget what you promised me." Sayuri nodded slowly. Sonoko couldn't help asking, "Xiaxi, what were you whispering to Matsumoto-sensei? What did she promise you?" Xiaxi only said, "You'll find out in a bit." They had taken only a few steps when a dull thud came from inside the lounge. Fearful something had happened to their teacher, Ron and the others hurried back. When they opened the door, they found Matsumoto Sayuri lying on the floor, a smear of blood at the corner of her mouth and a shattered bottle of lemon tea beside her. "Traveler, the world mission has been refreshed," Paimon chimed, reminding Xiaxi. Xiaxi found it odd that the world mission only appeared at that moment, then realized why. The incident hadn't occurred until now, so the mission couldn't have triggered earlier. Usually, she arrived at scenes after things had already happened, and the mission would activate on contact with relevant people or items. She opened the new mission and discovered its requirements were different from usual. Previously, missions focused on solving the case and finding the culprit. This one read more like a prompt to influence events. World Mission, the June Bride murder case. The bride, at the threshold of the happiest moment of her life, fell down right before the wedding, or perhaps the clever traveler had prevented the tragedy in time and identified the culprit beforehand. But did she truly prevent it? Mission requirements. Discover the truth behind the incident and witness the bride's choice. Xiaxi realized the system was smarter than she'd thought. It adjusted the mission objectives to fit the unfolding situation. 33. The groom's motive for murder. Seeing Miss Matsumoto's condition, Conan hurriedly told Rand to call a doctor and the police. He noticed Xiaxi standing motionless nearby and felt a flicker of confusion, but saving the bride came first. Conan leaned close to check her vitals and frowned. The situation was strange. Miss Matsumoto's symptoms didn't quite add up. It was as if something had been done to her that didn't behave like an ordinary poisoning. He thought of Xiaxi, who had been standing aside from the start and subtly blocking others from getting near the bride. Maybe Xiaxi assumed no one would suspect something if a child approached. Conan was fast, and she hadn't stopped him, but Conan realized the girl's composure must mean she knew more than she was letting on. He wondered what Xiaxi had said to convince Miss Matsumoto to go along with it. Still, he said nothing. He hadn't known Xiaxi long, but he knew her well enough to trust that she wouldn't act without a reason, and certainly not in a way that would get Miss Matsumoto involved unless there was cause. What was that cause? Recalling Xiaxi's reaction earlier, Conan asked himself if this had anything to do with the groom. The ambulance arrived quickly, and Miss Matsumoto was loaded aboard for emergency treatment. Because many guests were police officers, Inspector Magure and the others soon controlled the scene. The forensics team analyzed the spilled lemon tea and confirmed the presence of sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide, Xiaxi blurted, stunned. She had assumed that someone who would drug the bride at her wedding, trying to ruin her happiest day, would use a deadly poison. Instead, the groom had used sodium hydroxide, a highly alkaline, corrosive chemical that isn't typically used to kill. It causes intense irritation and severe burns on contact. Ingestion can permanently damage the mouth, throat, and digestive tract, and, in extreme cases, cause shock. But its corrosive nature also provokes an immediate reaction. Anyone who drinks it would recoil at once and likely not consume a fatal amount. In short, the groom hadn't meant to kill Miss Matsumoto. He had meant to destroy her voice. Miss Matsumoto was a music teacher and, according to Ran and the others, an excellent singer. Using sodium hydroxide would very likely leave irreversible damage to her vocal cords, ending her ability to sing. Xiaxi didn't know whether to call that cruelty or callousness. What in the world had Miss Matsumoto done to deserve such a punishment? Seeing Xiaxi's shocked face, Conan realized the poisoned drink had not been her doing. Someone else at the wedding had slipped the chemical into the tea, and Shiashi already suspected who. There was only one person whose involvement would make both Shiashi and Miss Matsumoto hesitant to name the culprit outright: the groom. Other officers were already combing the room for clues. 7 people had entered or left the bride's lounge before the poisoning: Conan, Ran, Sonoko, Senior Umemiya, Kazumi Takanaka, the bride's best friend, the groom Toshihiko Takasugi, and the bride's father, Matsumoto Kiyochika. A camera in the room had recorded most of the activity. At first, it seemed to show 4 people touching the lemon tea in the bride's hand: Senior Umemiya, Kazumi, Toshihiko, and Matsumoto Kiyochika. But Shiashi, who had been watching closely because she suspected trouble, remembered that Miss Matsumoto had actually picked up the wrong can by accident, the same one Sonoko had left on the table earlier. Shiashi had been about to warn her when the groom suddenly stepped in. The tape captured everything, but the camera angle made 2 cans on the table appear as one. Careful review revealed a subtle change. The label on the can shifted direction after someone briefly blocked the view, indicating a swap or handling that the angle obscured. Forensics then found that the poisoned can bore only 3 sets of fingerprints: Sonoko's, Matsumoto Sayuri's, and Toshihiko Takasugi's. Sonoko had drunk from her can earlier and was unharmed, which meant the sodium hydroxide must have been added after she drank. The chemical's tendency to absorb moisture from the air meant the culprit would have needed to keep it sealed in a glass bottle with a desiccant. Investigators later found such a bottle, with the desiccant removed, thrown into a hallway trash can. That confirmed the poison had been brought into the room by someone other than the bride. By process of elimination, the groom was the only person who could have done it. Shiashi didn't want to prolong the situation. With most of the evidence laid out, she confronted him publicly and walked everyone through the clues. When Matsumoto Kiyochika heard that the man who had harmed his daughter was her groom, fury overtook him. He lunged at Toshihiko, grabbing the collar of the suit he was wearing. "It was you! Tell me why. Why would you hurt my daughter?" he roared. Faced with the evidence, Toshihiko did not deny it. He shrugged off Matsumoto's hands and spoke with a cold mix of resentment and grim satisfaction. "This is all your fault. What happened to her is because of you." Then he told them why. 20 years earlier, when Matsumoto Kiyochika had been chasing a fugitive, his pursuit had struck a woman and her child as they passed by. The woman had been critically injured and, because the window for life-saving treatment was missed in the chaos, she died. The boy, Toshiko, had lost his mother and, with no other relatives, had been taken in by the Takasugi couple. For years, he'd lived with that loss. 7 years ago, Toshihiko discovered that his girlfriend's best friend was the daughter of the man who had indirectly caused his mother's death. He began to court the bride, not for love but to exact revenge. That was why he had targeted Sayuri, not to kill her, but to take away what mattered most, her voice, and make her father taste a similar, unbearable loss. "I want you to feel what it's like to lose the person you love most," Toshihiko said, looking at Matsumoto Kiyochika with a grim, satisfied smile. Shiashi felt a cold revulsion. So that was it, striking at the daughter because he couldn't reach the father, picking on the weak instead of confronting the one he truly blamed. Paimon, standing beside her, was baffled. "Traveler, why would he go after the bride? Miss Matsumoto didn't do anything to him, right?" he murmured. But the groom's answer had already been given in his own voice. A calculated, cruel attempt to make someone else suffer for his loss. 34. The bride's choice. Shishi found herself agreeing with Sonoko's assessment of Toshihiko Takasugi: indecisive, unreliable, and ill-suited to inherit the Takasugi group. She'd thought Sonoko was exaggerating before, but now it seemed all too likely to be true. Toshihiko had discovered 7 years ago that Matsumoto Sayuri was the daughter of the person indirectly responsible for his mother's death, and he'd begun to court her then. For 7 years, he'd done nothing but get close to her. Shiashi couldn't help but wonder why. If he hated Matsumoto Kiyochika so deeply, he didn't use other means, use Sayuri as a way to get to her father, dig up dirt, manufacture evidence, or simply expose the truth to the press. Even revealing his identity and going public would have been devastating leverage. Targeting the daughter and making her suffer in order to make the father taste the same pain seemed cruel and unnecessary. Of course, Shiashi didn't condone such actions. She was just puzzled by them. As heir to the Takasugi group, Toshihiko had other options. Why choose the innocent path of manipulating a girl? Then, did you ever like Miss Matsumoto? Shiashi asked suddenly. No, Toshihiko laughed bitterly. That stupid woman probably still thinks I only courted her for other reasons. Before he could finish, a sharp slap cut him off. Takanaka Kazumi stood with her hand raised, eyes blazing. You're the one who knows nothing, she snapped. Takanaka then revealed something that stunned everyone. Matsumoto Sayuri had known everything: the car accident 20 years ago, the identity of the groom, and more. She even disclosed that the groom had been the person Sayuri had thought of as her first love for the past 20 years. Toshihiko went pale, frozen as the new information landed. Then, as the room went quiet, a voice floated out from Shiashi's phone on speaker. Matsumoto Kiyochika, who had been anxiously waiting, thought his daughter had been revived and rushed to ask about her condition. Dad, I actually wasn't poisoned. Matsumoto Sayuri's voice came over the speaker, soft and apologetic. An astonished chorus broke out. Backtracked to a little over an hour earlier, in the bride's lounge after everyone else had left. Shiashi had looked Sayuri in the eye. Miss Matsumoto, you saw it, didn't you? Toshihiko laced the lemon tea. Were you really going to pretend you didn't see and drink it anyway? Sayuri was silent for a beat before answering. Shiashi, thank you for worrying, but I have a reason. I owe Toshihiko something, and I want to atone to him. Shiashi hadn't expected that. Owe him? To atone with her life? It made no sense. Why don't you talk to him? Maybe there's a misunderstanding. What about your father and your friends? If something happened to you, wouldn't it destroy them? Are you really going to let your father spend his life grieving for a man who might not even love you? Sayuri's expression wavered. Shiashi decided on a gamble. Miss Matsumoto, let's make a bet. She had made it up on the spot. Sayuri had asked Shiashi to pretend to drink the lemon tea to see whether Toshihiko showed any hesitation, an attempt to test whether he still had feelings for her. If Sayuri won, Shiashi would get her father to help Sayuri find someone through the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. If Shiashi won, Sayuri would stop interfering in Shiashi's affairs. Looking back, Shiashi realized Sayuri likely only wanted to stop her from doing something desperate. The result meant Shiashi had lost. Sayuri's voice in the present was low but not broken, as if she'd resolved something within herself. Paimon, baffled, piped up, Traveler, are you seriously planning to look for your brother here? Shiashi shrugged inwardly. She'd invented the bet as an excuse, and looking for my brother was a convenient pretext she could reuse later. Dad, let's leave today alone, Sayuri told Matsumoto Kiyochika. She didn't want to press the issue and asked everyone not to bring it up again. Then she turned to Toshihiko. Toshihiko, no, Mr. Takasugi, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. Shiashi was right. I should have spoken to you long ago, formally apologized on my father's behalf, and begged your forgiveness. Maybe then you wouldn't have been consumed by hatred. Toshihiko, Mr. Takasugi, I'm sorry for wasting 7 years of your time, she added, voice steady. When Toshihiko heard that Sayuri was unharmed, relief washed over him for reasons he couldn't fully name. The way she now addressed him, formally as Mr. Takasugi, told him she had likely let go of whatever feelings she'd held. Sayuri had always been decisive once she made up her mind. Shiashi watched Sayuri call him Mr. Takasugi and understood a choice had been made. Combined with Toshihiko's earlier revelations about events 20 years ago, she realized she had probably completed the world mission that had refreshed that day. She pulled up her quest log and scanned it. The new world mission was marked completed. Shiashi didn't notice at first that, in her quest log, besides the June Bride murder case she had just resolved, another world mission also showed as completed. 35. Lavender Villa Locked Room Murder Case. Matsumoto Kiyochika stared at the phone he just hung up, trying to steady the relief that his daughter was safe. He then walked over to Takasugi Toshihiko and bowed deeply, apologizing for the mistake that had indirectly caused the death of his mother. Takasugi looked at the man bowing before him and thought of Sayuri. Tears flowed uncontrollably, and a measure of the hatred that had lodged in his chest finally loosened. Seriously, why didn't you two talk to each other sooner? Don't any of you have mouths? Shashi scolded them in her head. Then she saw Matsumoto approaching her and wondered why he was looking for her now. Miss Natsume, he began, thank you very much for persuading my daughter. As for your request, I will do my best to help you find your older brother. Shashi felt that was just an excuse. Facing Superintendent Matsumoto's sincere, grateful eyes, she managed an awkward smile and thanked him. The matter seemed settled, and it looked like the wedding would not be going ahead, especially not with Konan Edogawa around. Still, Shashi was annoyed. She held herself for a moment, then couldn't resist turning back and slapping Takasugi once before leaving. Humph, what an idiot, she thought. He can't read the situation and only knows how to hurt an innocent girl. Conan, hey Shashi, what are you doing? Is it really okay to hit someone right in front of a bunch of police officers? He glanced around in disbelief. The surrounding officers had all turned their heads as if pretending they hadn't seen a thing. Although they had agreed not to press charges at Matsumoto Sayuri's request, the officers clearly still resented a man who had tried to harm their colleague's daughter. On the way home, Shashi texted Diluk to report the day's events. Sigh, what lousy luck for the Takasugi group to have an heir like that. Even though everyone agreed to keep silent about what happened to Matsumoto Sayuri, there's no such thing as an airtight secret. With so many people knowing, word would leak and would harm the Takasugi group. That would be an opportunity for outside interference. Diluk's businesses and influence were mainly in Country H, but the core of things happened in Japan. He'd been planning to get involved in Japanese industries sooner or later. If the Takasugi group started to stumble now, striking first would yield the greatest profit before other groups even heard the news. Shashi scolded herself for thinking of kicking them while they were down for a second, then went right back to planning. At home, she opened the system to check task rewards and was surprised to find a world mission had already appeared, and it showed as completed. She opened the mission description. World mission, prelude to the Detective Conan. In a world full of detectives, a Conan event related to detectives will be held in the future. Now, in the beautiful Lavender Villa, its prelude has begun. Mission requirement, solve the Lavender Villa case. Time rewound to a little earlier. Shikoku, Lavender Villa. Miss Lisa, we're here. This is where I'm working at the moment. Noelle led Lisa into the Lavender Villa. This was the identity the world had assigned to Noelle, a maid at the villa. Supposedly, something had happened to the maid who worked here before, and Noelle had been hired to replace her. Noelle felt a twinge of guilt about leaving so soon after arriving, but the traveler's duties came first. Fortunately, the villa's butler had been easy to deal with. He only asked her to finish her current shift before leaving. Noelle was grateful to the butler, Mr. Koya Renzo, and wanted to find the killer before she left to repay his kindness. But she wasn't good at solving mysteries. She could only gather what clues she could and then ask others for help. She had seen how hard the traveler worked and didn't want to trouble her further, but Lisa happened to be free and offered to help after hearing the situation. This villa really has a lot of lavender, Lisa observed as they walked through the grounds. Did the young lady like lavender very much? Yes, Noelle replied after thinking for a moment. According to Mr. Koya, she loved lavender. After she was sadly murdered, Mr. Koya kept the lavender everywhere just the same. Then take me to the room where the young lady was killed, Lisa said. Right this way, Miss Lisa. Noelle led her eagerly. Is it really okay for you to take an outsider to the crime scene? Lisa asked on the way. Don't worry, Miss Lisa. I've spoken with Mr. Koya, Noelle said, smiling. He was very happy I found someone to look into it and said he hopes we can discover the truth. At the door to the crime scene, they ran into Butler Koya. Mr. Koya, Noelle greeted him warmly. It's Noelle, the butler replied. Is this the friend you mentioned who's investigating? Is she a detective? Heh, I'm not a detective, just a librarian, Lisa said with a dismissive smile. Noelle's grateful for all the care Mr. Koya has shown, so she asked me to help. The butler's expression shifted. He had come to see what kind of person Noelle had brought. Learning she wasn't a detective, but only a librarian relieved him, and he quickly excused himself. Lisa watched him go and narrowed her eyes. He seems to know his young lady's secret. Noelle, Lisa asked quietly, did Mr. Koya care for his young lady very much? Of course, Noel said without hesitation. He looked after her deeply. After she died, Mr. Koya made sure the room was kept clean, but left it as close to its original state as possible. She opened the door. Miss Lisa, this is the crime scene. If there's anything you need, I'll help. Seeing Noelle so eager, Lisa told her to search the room's corners, under the cabinets, and other nooks for any clues. Lisa walked to the window to examine the doors and windows in this locked room case. She noticed one window wasn't truly sealed. It was held in place only by glue and could be removed fairly easily. Could it be that the room wasn't locked from the inside when the incident happened, and the young lady had been murdered rather than having killed herself? 36. Two tragedies. No, it's not certain yet. After all, more than 6 months have passed since the incident. We can't rule out the possibility that the window was tampered with after the case occurred. Lisa kept carefully inspecting the strange marks around the window as she listened to Noelle's account. Noelle, you mentioned the maid who worked here before you was involved in that case. Tell me everything you know. Noelle brightened. Okay, the maid before me was named Shauna. She'd worked at this villa for a long time. When the incident happened, only the young mistress and Miss Shauna were here. At first, the police ruled it a suicide, right? Lisa eased the window open and climbed out to examine the sash from the outside. Yeah. Noelle was still crawling around inside the room, checking under the bed and along the baseboards. The initial investigation said the room where the young mistress died was a locked room, so they concluded suicide. Then, about half a year later, well, actually a month ago, a high school detective came through. He claimed the crime scene wasn't a locked room, so he pointed suspicion at Miss Shanna. After he told the police, they began investigating her. Wait, what did that detective find that made him think the room wasn't locked? Lisa knelt on the lawn, scanning the ground near the window. Her fingers closed on something small and metallic. She picked it up and turned it over. Noelle paused and looked up. That detective said he found screws around the window whose heads had been cut off. He told the police it must have been a homicide. Noelle's voice went flat. Because of that, they suspected Miss Shanna. In the end, she couldn't stand it, and she killed herself. The police wrote it up as suicide out of guilt and closed the case. I don't believe Miss Shanna was guilty. Noelle's face hardened. Even when she died, she kept saying she didn't kill anyone. Mr. Koya said he believed she didn't do it either. Even if the window wasn't sealed later, it could have been some outsider. Lisa scratched at the soil, frowning. I don't either, she said, but there's more to it. Noelle looked around the empty room, frustrated that his search had turned up nothing. His gaze drifted to the fireplace, and he suddenly scrambled inside, crawling into the soot-stained hollow. Ash smeared his face and hands. When he came back out, he was covered in black, clutching something. Miss Lisa, look, I found something. Lisa smiled despite herself and took the object. It was a glass medicine bottle, broken but largely intact, its label long gone, its neck chipped. Is this the only bottle in the fireplace? No, there are shards, but this one was relatively whole, so I brought it out. Noelle wiped his hands on his trousers and watched her hopefully. Will this help with the case? It will, Lisa said. You've been very helpful, Noelle. She set the bottle on the floor and turned the screw she'd picked up over in her hand. The head had been sawn off, as Noelle had said, but rust pitted the metal. Lisa's brow tightened. One piece of good news and one piece of bad, she said. Actually, they might both be bad. First, the young mistress's death. I'm convinced now it really was suicide. The room was a locked room at the time. She had been taking addictive drugs, the kind that would ruin someone mentally and physically. Finding medicine in the fireplace makes that much clearer. Noelle stiffened. Then the detective was wrong. Partly, Lisa said. That's the second thing. The detective wasn't entirely wrong to notice tampering. There really was a screw with its head cut off. But his timing was wrong. That screw is rusty. Judging by the corrosion, it hasn't been there for 6 months. It's probably no more than 3 months old. Whoever cut that screw did it after the young mistress died. Noelle blinked. So someone broke in later? Likely, Lisa said. After the incident, someone, probably a member of the staff or a petty thief, forced the window to come and go. It wasn't evidence of how the young mistress was killed. The high school detective took that recent tampering and, with not enough patience or observation, presented it as if it had happened at the time of death. The police believed him without digging deeper. They focused on Miss Shauna because she was present, and the rest followed. Lisa let out a short, bitter laugh. Confidence misapplied becomes arrogance, and the police, who couldn't be bothered to check timelines or rust, are laughable. A boy shows up with an unverified theory and they overturn their finding without a proper re-examination. The consequence was that Miss Shanna, innocent, was driven to kill herself. Noelle's shoulders slumped. But Miss Shanna is already. Yes. Lisa's smile went cold. The maid was declared suicide out of guilt, all because of an arrogant detective, incompetent officers, and a selfish butler who couldn't or wouldn't defend her. Isn't that right, Mr. Koya? She looked toward the doorway, her tone accusing, as footsteps sounded beyond the threshold. Chapter 37. Angry Lisa. Lisa never expected that a casual glance at the librarian's notes, seeing the name Lavender Villa, remembering that's where Noelle worked, and dropping by on a whim, would uncover something like this. They had only just arrived when the butler appeared in the doorway and stepped into the room. Noelle watched him with a mixture of surprise and confusion. "Miss Lisa, why did you call Mr. Koya selfish?" she asked. Then, turning to the butler, "Mr. Koya, why were you hiding by the door?" Renzo Koya bowed his head, his hands clenched at his sides. He trembled, unable to find words at first. Lisa smiled faintly and crossed her arms. "Let me explain," she said. "You see, Mr. Koya knew the truth about his young mistress's death from the beginning." Noelle stared at him. "Then why didn't you tell anyone?" Renzo finally answered, voice thick with shame. "I couldn't. I thought revealing it would ruin her reputation. I couldn't let that happen." Noelle's eyes hardened. "But why didn't you speak up when Miss Kana was accused? At first it was ruled a suicide. Understandable that you wanted to protect the young mistress. But later Miss Kana was accused of murder. You knew the truth. Why didn't you do something then?" I thought the police would clear her," Renzo said, avoiding Noelle's gaze. "I didn't expect." "You didn't expect they hadn't investigated carefully," Lisa finished sharply. "You didn't expect Miss Kana would be driven to suicide by how everyone treated her. Is that it?" Noelle's voice broke. "Miss Kana kept insisting she didn't do it right before she died. She was defending herself until the end. I thought you trusted her enough to help, Mr. Koya. I never imagined you knew the truth and did nothing for her." Tears pricked Renzo's eyes. "After she died, I regretted it every day. I tried to go to the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department several times to tell them the truth and clear her name. But each time I reached the entrance, the image of the young mistress, how she was before she died, would come back to me. I feared harming her reputation by speaking out. I couldn't take the step. I'm sorry." Lisa's expression turned cold. "It's too late for apologies. Whatever reasons you had, you stood by and watched an innocent girl suffer. Tell me something else. Who was the detective who happened to pass by and reopen the case? I want to know who this self-righteous detective is." Renzo shook his head. "I don't know his name." "You don't know?" Lisa blinked. "How could you not know? You were the one who let him in." "He was a young man traveling through Shikoku who heard about the case and wanted to look. The case had been closed for 6 months. There was nothing left to investigate. I thought he'd just glance around and leave. I never expected him to claim he had solved the locked room murder of the young mistress." "Did he give his name when he visited?" Noelle asked. Renzo frowned. "He didn't leave a name with the police or the papers. His accent was odd, and he kept calling himself something like Osho. I'm sorry, that's all I know." Lisa mulled that over, her face unreadable. After a moment, she made a decision. "Noelle, I don't want you working at Lavender Villa anymore. Go home early." Renzo said nothing and quietly terminated Noelle's employment. Noelle bowed, fighting back tears. "Mr. Koya, thank you for all your help, but please, go to the Tokyo police and tell them the truth. Clear Miss Kana's name. Don't let her last image be suicide from fear of accusation." He nodded, looking exhausted but resolved. "Yes, I will." On the walk back, Noelle was subdued. "Miss Lisa, do you think Mr. Koya will actually go and tell them?" "He probably will. There's no point in hiding it now," Lisa said. She glanced at Noelle, who was walking with her head down, and reached out to pat her gently on the head. It's all right. Don't be so sad. It's not over yet. Big sister Lisa still needs your help. Noelle's face brightened at once. Oh, anything you need, Miss Lisa. I can do it. I want you to use your free time to help me find that high school detective with the strange voice, Lisa said. I spend most of my time in the library. I can't investigate it myself. Okay, leave it to me, Noelle agreed eagerly. Lisa's smile softened, but there was a sharp edge to it. When we find him, I want to, just a little, teach that irresponsible young detective a lesson. Noelle shivered despite herself at the smile on Lisa's face. 38. Astrology. She stared at the phrase Lavender Villa in the mission description. Remembering that Noelle worked there as a maid, she messaged her to ask if anything unusual was happening. Noelle replied quickly. Seeing the words Detective Conan in the world mission and knowing Noelle's situation, she guessed this must be the trigger for the Detective Conan incident that would come later. She had a strong impression of that case. She even felt a certain sympathy for the culprit. The murderer was Natsuki Koshimizu, who had planned the scheme to seek revenge for a friend, a maid who had been falsely accused and died. Natsuki's goal had been to find the high school detective who had been responsible for that injustice. To draw him out, Natsuki had invited several high school detectives, Heiji Hattori, Suguru Hakuba, and Tokitsu Junya, among others. The oddly speaking high school detective who asked Noelle to find someone had to be Tokitsu Junya, she thought. She sent what she knew to Noelle, but didn't want to overhelp. If she interfered too much, Noelle might resent it. Whether that detective really was Tokitsu Junya was for Noelle to confirm. As for how Lisa intended to teach him a lesson once he was found, she planned to stay out of it. Lisa was an adult and clever. She would know how to handle it properly. What bothered Shiashi more was why the world mission had refreshed, even though Conan hadn't appeared. Maybe a mission tied to a case from the original story would refresh if the related case was solved, even without Conan. If Lisa and Noelle solved the Lavender Villa murder, it might directly lead to the Detective Conan incident later, explaining why the mission updated and showed as completed. Shiashi stroked her chin, thinking. It could be that Conan wasn't strictly necessary. Whenever a case connected to the original work was resolved, the world mission could trigger. Then she felt discouraged again. Often, when Conan wasn't around, some cases never triggered at all. If they didn't trigger, the world mission wouldn't refresh. The library director subplot had been like that. Lisa had watched him for days and never seen him act. Maybe they had to wait for the detective boys to go to the library for something to happen. Sigh. Cases really did tend to pull detectives into them. 2 days later, Shiashi read the newspaper report about Lavender Villa murder. Apparently, the butler had finally gone to the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department and told the truth. The article focused mostly on condemning the police's incompetence. The detective who had misled the investigation, the one the public didn't know the name of, was only mentioned in passing. Shiashi frowned. Lisa probably wouldn't be pleased to see a report that skimmed over the real culprit's role. How was she planning to make that high school detective pay? In Shikoku, 2 people saw the same report. Natsuki Koshimizu read it with mixed relief and anger. She was glad Shauna's name had been cleared, but she pressed her fingers to the words, high school detective, in the paper. There was still someone who had never paid for their mistake. Tokitsu Junya read the report too, but he felt anything but relief. If people discovered that the high school detective who had misled the police was him, it would be a devastating stain on his reputation, something he couldn't accept. He was furious that the past had to be opened up again. The perpetrator had committed suicide out of guilt years ago, and the police had closed the case. Why did those detectives have to pry it up now? That evening at the Mori Detective Agency, Sonoko flopped onto the sofa beside Ran Mori, bubbling with excitement. Conan sat on the adjacent sofa, pretending to watch TV while actually listening closely to their conversation. Whenever Sonoko showed up at Ran's house, something was bound to happen, and he didn't want Ran and Sonoko going out late together, especially not to meet a stranger. He wanted to follow them and make sure they were safe. Besides, this astrology stuff sounded like a scam aimed at gullible girls. He hoped to expose it so they wouldn't fall for it again. Ran, have you heard? Sonoko exclaimed. Everyone says she's unbelievably accurate. Ran nodded. She had heard whispers about the astrologer too, though she didn't know much. I don't know where she sets up, though, Ran said. I heard her location changes every day. Whether you find her depends on fate. Sonoko grinned when she saw Ran's interest. I asked my classmates to tell me if they saw her. Today, one of them messaged me. They saw her at a spot nearby. As soon as I saw it, I came over. I knew you'd want to go, Ran. Then let's not waste time. Let's go before she leaves. Sonoko jumped up and grabbed Ran's hand, ready to pull her out the door. Wait, Ran Nichin, I want to go too. Conan sprang to his feet and clutched Ran's other hand, putting on a pouty, spoiled look. How could he let two girls head out late to see a stranger? If there was any danger, he had to be there. If the astrologer was a con artist, he could unmask her and spare Sonoko and Ran the embarrassment of being fooled. 39. Fate reflected in the water. Thump! Sonoko smacked the kid on the head. She watched with exasperation as Conan clung to Ran like a child and tried to insert himself into the girl's plans. You're always about deductions, aren't you? What are you doing tagging along? Stay home. Ow! Conan let go of Ran's hand and rubbed the sore spot. Sonoko had the nerve to roughhouse a child. Couldn't she be a little kinder? He dropped his pride. Ran Nichin, I'm curious about astrology too. Please let me come. I don't want to be alone at home. Sonoko glanced at Ran and scowled. Ran, you're not seriously going to bring him, are you? He runs off at crime scenes. He won't be scared. He'll be trouble. Ran hesitated for a moment, then looked down at Conan's pleading face and felt her resolve melt. Sonoko, let's just bring Conan. Dad won't be back until late, and it wouldn't be right to leave him alone. She crouched slightly to look him in the eye. Conan, you promise you won't run off or blabber, okay? I won't. I definitely won't run off or blabber. He could agree for now and see how things went later. Sonoko sighed, defeated. Seeing Ran so determined, she could only give in. She led Ran and Conan away from the bright commercial street, down a narrower lane, then a left, then a right. The neon and shop windows faded behind them until only distant streetlights faintly outlined their figures. The road ahead was almost deserted and unnervingly quiet. Sonoko, are you sure this is the right way? Ran asked, feeling suddenly uneasy. Conan squinted into the dimness. Who would do business where hardly anyone walked? Did Sonoko get the directions wrong? I found it. How could I, Sonoko-sama, get lost? Sonoko replied a bit too loudly, looking left and right. Then her face brightened. She pointed ahead and tugged Ran toward a tiny stall tucked in a shadowed alcove. From a distance, Conan could make out only someone sitting behind a table with something on it. There wasn't even a lamp. As he came closer, the object on the table resolved into a simple circular disc. Its surface was perfectly clear, like still water, and the stars above seemed to lie suspended on it. He glanced up. Unlike the crowded commercial street, where tall buildings and neon drowned out the night sky, the stars here shone distinctly. No wonder the so-called astrologer had chosen this spot. She needed a dark sky. Who's first, ladies? What do you wish to have divined? A voice asked. It was a young voice. Conan squinted at the person behind the table. The astrologer wasn't the mature woman he'd expected. She looked very young, maybe no older than 20, wearing a wide-brimmed pointed hat. 2 long braids hung down her back beneath a medium-length cape. Tiny star motifs dotted her clothes. If she was playing at being an astrologer, she did it with conviction. Sonoko, practically vibrating with excitement, stuck her hand out. Me! I'll go first. Master, when will my fated one appear? Is there anything I should do to help fate along? The girl at the table smiled without taking offense. My name is astrologist Mona Magistus. Call me Mona, no need for honorifics. I'm still studying under my master, my teacher. She coughed, as if embarrassed by the slip. Conan's ears pricked. Mona Magistus? That surname wasn't Japanese. Was she from some distinguished family? He filed that thought away and watched as Mona gave Sonoko short, practical instructions. No need to do anything special. Just place your hands on the hydromancy orb. She gestured to the disc. Sonoko leaned forward and set her hands on the cool edge of the orb. The surface was glassy and flawless, like a shallow pool. She peered into it, heart thumping. Mona's voice grew softer, almost reverent. Then she declared, Fate, reflected in water. As Mona cried out, A thin mist seemed to materialize around them. Wow! Sonoko and Ran both exclaimed, their confidence in Mona's divination visibly bolstered. Conan saw the same vapor rising and felt the air grow damper. It could have been his imagination, but the humidity was real. He didn't think it was supernatural. There had to be some mechanism behind it. Mona was focused on Sonoko, so Conan slipped quietly toward the table, intending to check for hidden devices. He hadn't taken many steps before Ran grabbed his collar. "Conan, what did you promise me before we came?" Ran asked, her expression serious. "Sorry, Ran, I won't run off anymore," Conan replied, a little flustered under her steady gaze. Worried about upsetting her if he wandered away again, he stayed put by Ran's side to listen to Sonoko's reading. Asking about love? Got it." Mona peered into the water in the hydrodivination bowl. Sonoko leaned over too, but all she could see were the shining reflections of stars. "Your destined one will appear by the summer sea," Mona announced. "He will step forward to protect you when you're in danger." "A hero saving a beauty? How romantic!" Sonoko gushed, cupping her cheeks and blushing as she lost herself in the fantasy. Conan found the reading oddly specific. He had studied tricks like this before. Diviners and astrologers often used cold reading, observing clothes, gestures, tone, and other tiny clues to make high-probability guesses that convince people they were being told secrets. A skilled cold reader would start with questions to build rapport, then deliver vague statements the client would fill in. He'd expected Mona to ask a few things first. Instead, she just delivered a blunt result. If she was wrong, it would be easy to catch. Yet many people here seemed to believe her. Had she never missed? Conan concluded she was likely safe from exposure because Sonoko's question was about an unverifiable future. "Ran, how was it? See? I told you she was accurate." Sonoko stood and offered her seat to Ran. "Hurry up. What are you going to ask? You're not going to ask about that Kudo guy, are you?" she added, glancing at Ran. Ran hesitated, then asked about Shinichi. Since he had disappeared after the amusement park incident, she hadn't seen him again. Though she sometimes got calls, she hadn't seen him in person and still worried. Hearing others praise the divination, she hoped for some reassurance. Conan narrowed his eyes. The events hadn't even happened, yet Sonoko already declared the reading reliable. When Sonoko teased that Ran might ask about Shinichi, Conan felt a mix of relief and dread. What if the astrologer guessed wrong and made Ran worry more? Ran placed her hand on the bowl. "Fate, manifest," Mona intoned. Then the mist thickened again. Conan watched her closely for any trick. She had only placed her hands on the rim and spoken. The environment changed instantly. Was there an accomplice? "Miss Moori, the person you want to know about is in a dark shadow right now," Mona said without delay. "But he's not in immediate danger. He isn't far from you. He may even be right beside you." Ran went quiet. The news, Shinichi not in immediate danger and possibly nearby, relieved some of her worry, though it left questions. Conan was stunned. How had Mona known? Could she divine details about the two men in black from the amusement park? The thought sent his mind racing. He wanted his identity back and to end Ran's worry. "Hey, let me try," Conan piped up, putting on a childlike tone. "Ran, let me have a turn." Ran smiled and didn't stop him. Conan sat at the table. "What do you want to ask, little one?" Mona asked, arching an eyebrow. He had to be careful. If he directly asked about the men in black, Ran might suspect a connection to Shinichi. He phrased it vaguely. "Some time ago, I took the wrong medicine. I want to know about the two people who gave it to me." Ran glanced at him puzzled. Did he really take wrong medicine? She checked his complexion. He looked healthy enough. Mona didn't seem surprised by a question that hinted at the black organization. She placed her hands on the bowl and read the water. "Alcohol," she announced. The answer was unexpectedly sparse, and Mona herself sounded a little surprised that the hydrodivination bowl offered so little information. Was it because the matter touched on something deeper and more dangerous?